All right, taking control of your parenting. In this video, we're going to be looking at communicating with your kids. The number one complaint to problems in business, government, marriage, friendship, and family is there is a lack of communication here. Doesn't matter how big or small the organization is. If there's problems within an organization, and a family is a small organization, if there are problems, somebody's going to say it's because there's a lack of communication. I don't know what's going on around here. Today we're living under a flood of digital communication. Okay, it's an onslaught. It comes at us from everywhere. Every device we own, every digital device we own can communicate to the internet. The internet communicates to the whole world. We're connected to the whole world. If your son or your daughter has an iPad or a phone that can Wi-Fi connect to the internet, he can look anywhere. We can get information from anywhere. We can YouTube things on how to do almost anything. Then there's movies on demand. We can watch any movie that we want. Music. Every family member has their own music list, their own playlist. And you can listen to any music in the world. So one son is listening to this, another is listening to that. Mom is listening to this other thing. Dad is listening to something else. When we watch movies, we don't do it together as a family anymore. Each one does what they want to do. The digital world has made it so everyone can access and do exactly what each person wants to do. You don't have to do it with someone else. You don't have to compromise. You don't have to, okay, we'll watch what you want to watch. No, everyone can do what they want. And the confusion of the mass digital way of communicating with one another. Someone sends me a request and I don't have time to look at it right now. Then 2 hours later, I can't remember in what form it came to me. Was it emailed to me? Was it texted to me? Some people have 2 different email addresses. What is it? Message to me? I don't, and I'm looking all over the place because I can't remember where it came from. Or if I want to communicate to a whole group of people, invite people to something, what do I use? Some people are on Facebook, some are on Instagram, some are on this, some are on that. It's like we have all these unprecedented ways of communicating with one another, but it's harder than ever to communicate because there's so many forms. In the church world, what form do we as leaders in the church use? How do we connect with people? It's really difficult. So it's on the one hand, it's designed to connect us, but in some ways it disconnects us just the same. And because of the whole digital way of connecting, we can niche market. We can isolate ourselves with people who like and think exactly like we do. No longer do we have to put up with people that we don't connect with. So it's isolating people into their own special interests. And it's getting harder and harder for people to just get along with one another. Anyone that thinks anything differently, then we don't know how to handle it. We have no practice. Well, we're going to explore how we can, as parents, or if you're trying to help someone, maybe you're helping a parent do some of this, build meaningful communication into our family life. We're going to use 2 building metaphors to help us in our thinking. We're going to use walls. Okay, that's a building. We build walls, or we build bridges. All right, so how to build walls. You can build walls in your family by doing these things. Number 1, by yelling. By talking really, really loud. Yelling is not only volume, but it's also anger. Okay, generally, when we're yelling at someone, we're angry. Now, there are some exceptions. Your son or your daughter, little son or your daughter goes running into the busy street, and you yell at them to get back. That's a warning. That's an emergency, and you want them to know that this isn't really important. Okay, that's different. The yelling I'm talking about is when you're frustrated with your child, when you're angry at your child. And instead of just communicating what you want to say, you think the volume and the anger is going to make things happen more. Colossians 3:21, fathers, do not embitter your children or they will become discouraged. The truth is that yelling really doesn't work. Kids, you see, we have to understand as parents that our children know us very well. They may know us better than we know ourselves. So when you tell your child, hey, clean up your room, they know that doesn't mean I have to do it right now. Now you think that's what you mean, but they know that's not what you mean. So they keep playing, they keep doing what they're doing, and then you say, hey, I told you to clean your room. That still doesn't mean that you have to clean your room right now. Look, I'm not going to tell you again, you better clean that room. Okay, they still know that they have time. That doesn't, I know things are escalating, but that doesn't mean I have to clean the room yet. Look, did I tell you I wasn't going to say this one more time? Yeah, you did, but how come you're saying it one more time? See, we say things like that. I'm not going to tell you again, but that just means I'm going to tell you 5 more times. And on the 4th time, maybe they'll listen. See, they know how many steps there are before they have to do something. Okay, they know, they've been down this road so many times before. And even though they couldn't articulate it, they instinctively know when to act and when not to act. So yelling really doesn't motivate. People that yell keep yelling. I'm going to tell you again. I'm not going to tell you again. I'm not going to tell you again. I'm not going to tell you again. They keep saying that. And they're yelling. And they're getting louder and louder and louder, but it doesn't mean anything. In fact, yelling only demotivates. If you're going to yell at me to do something, I really don't want to do it. You think about when you work for someone, if a boss is always yelling and screaming at everybody, it doesn't work. You know, in the United States here, when a policeman pulls you over, he doesn't have to yell at you. He can very calmly, take out his little pad and go, well, it seems like you were speeding. So why were you speeding? Well, and then I give some excuses, and he keeps writing. He said, well, I'm going to give you a little ticket here. And hopefully you don't speed anymore. He doesn't have to yell. He doesn't have to scream. In fact, if he yelled and screamed at you, you would drive away thinking that guy, this is unfair. Maybe I should fight this ticket. But if he's calm, he just writes out that ticket. And he says, here you go. Have a nice day. Now you drive away thinking, man, I got to stop. I got to slow down. I don't want to keep getting tickets. Yelling takes away from what you want to do. It builds a wall, not a bridge. Number 2, nagging. How can you build a wall? Nagging, criticizing, correcting, and directing. Ephesians 6:4. And now a word to you parents. Don't keep scolding and nagging your children, making them angry and resentful. Rather, bring them up in a loving discipline the Lord himself approves, with suggestions and godly advice. Scolding, nagging. It's kind of like the yelling thing. Scolding and nagging. What is nagging? Nagging is saying something over and over and over and over and over again. Now, why do you have to keep saying something over and over again? Because your kids eventually, they've grown to know that you say things 10 times before you really mean it. And the reason you have to nag is because you don't follow through with the first time. If you said, look, you guys have to clean up your room. And if you don't, then you don't get dessert tonight. End of story. I don't have to say another word. Because they're either going to clean their room or they're not going to get dessert. One of the two. And I don't care which one they do. Right? Because I want them to learn something. If they don't clean their room, I'm okay with that because now they don't get dessert. And they get to think about that. So I don't care. See, nagging is when you don't have a consequence and when you're not ready to follow through with the consequence. So you keep saying it over and over and over and over again. I see this happen with parents all the time. They keep telling their kids over and over and over again. I'm not going to tell you again. Oh, yes, you are. You're gonna tell them 10 more times. And they're still not going to do it. Scolding. Scolding is where again, why do we scold? Scolding is when you give your kids a big lecture because they did something wrong. And we give them this big, long lecture because we didn't have rules in place. If you spill your milk at the dinner table, here's what's going to happen. You have to clean it up. Okay? But if you didn't have that rule and they spill their milk, then you lecture them about being careful. What's wrong with you? You got to be careful. I've told you this many, many times. How many times are you going to have to spill the milk? It's because you haven't set up any rules, haven't set up any consequences. If you have consequences already set up, then it's easy. You don't have to scold. You don't have to go over and over and over the ground. You just have to say, okay, remember we agreed that if this happens, this is the consequences. You don't clean up your room, you go to bed early. Okay? So when they don't clean up, I don't have to lecture them about cleaning up. All right, let me scold you for 10, 15 minutes about why, look, I buy you all these toys and the least you can do is clean them up. I mean, this is offensive to me. And we go on and on and on and on. And guess what? The longer we go, the less effective it is on the kids because now they're feeling like this is unfair, this is uncalled for. Leaving a couple toys out is not worth all this hassle that you're giving me. Your punishment is way bigger than the offense. That's why you have to establish things early. Correcting, directing. Kids don't know everything, okay? But if we're going to constantly correct and direct, kids don't know stuff, so we have to tell them stuff. But there's sort of a limit that kids can handle. Do this, don't do that, try this. No, do it this way, turn to the left, no, turn to the right. When you're dressing your kid, no, straighten out your tie, no, tuck your shirt in. And we have this whole list of commands. And then we're subtly communicating to our kids, you can't do anything right. And I have to list everything that you do. Pick up that toy, that toy, that toy, that toy, that toy, that toy. When you're going out at night, don't do this, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that. And we make these huge lists. Instead of trusting our kids and assuming that they're going to do the right thing, we assume that they're going to do the wrong thing. We assume they're going to forget everything. And so we have to constantly remind them of every single detail. Number 3, how do you build walls? You build walls by prying. 1 Corinthians 13:7. If you love someone, you will be loyal to them no matter what the cost. You will always believe in them, always expect the best of them, and always stand your ground in defending them. Prying. What is prying? Prying is when you're trying to find something wrong. And kids smell that out. So where were you last night? You're talking to your teenager. Well, I was with some friends. Oh, really? Which friends? Well, Bob and Joe. Okay, well, who drove? And kids know what you're doing. Kids know that you're digging for a problem. So you want to know why your kids don't say a lot? Because if they say a lot, you're going to find something in there that you don't like. So why take the chance? So do you have a child where you ask them questions and they go, I don't know? That's the safest answer you can give. I don't know. I don't remember. Or they give little one-word answers. They're not going to give you any more than they have to. Why? Because they have learned from experience that you're looking for something. You're looking for some negative thing that you can correct, you can direct, you can call them on the carpet for. All right. How do you build walls? Number 4, ignoring. 1 Corinthians 13:7 again. If you love someone, you'll be loyal to them no matter what the cost. You'll always believe in them, always expect the best of them, and always stand your ground in defending them. All right. Being loyal. It's not ignoring. A lot of times as parents, we're so busy with our own lives that we don't have time for our children. We do most of the talking in the relationship to our children. We're always correcting, directing, challenging, yelling sometimes. When are we listening? When are we actually participating in their life? That's what I mean by ignoring. We're busy with our agenda for them instead of their agenda. All right, so how do you build bridges? You can build bridges by, number 1, demanding respect. Leviticus 19:3, each of you must respect his mother and father. I think a lot of parents today do not demand respect from their children. I mean, I was in the supermarket the other day, and this little 3-year-old, 4-year-old is just kicking the shins of his mother. Stop it, Johnny. Stop it. I'm not going to tell you again. And the kid is just kicking her in the shins. Now, what does she do? She's in a public place. She doesn't want to spank him or something, and she's embarrassed by the whole thing. And so she's like, I don't know what to do. And the kid just keeps doing it. I see that a lot. Kids talking back, kids not listening. Demand respect. Kids will give respect if you demand it. The only reason why a kid is not giving you, a parent, respect is because you're not demanding it. And demanding it isn't yelling and screaming. That isn't demanding anything. Respect is when there's consequences for bad behavior. That's the policeman again. We respect the policeman. Why? Because he has a book called Tickets. He can give us a ticket that costs us money and gives us points on our driving record. He demands respect. He doesn't have to yell. He doesn't have to scream. He doesn't have to lecture. Why? Because he has a consequence. Demand respect from your children by having consequences. Not yelling and screaming consequences. So the little kid kicking in the thing, okay, we were going to go to McDonald's afterwards, but we're not. That's the rule. The rule is you get no treats of any sort for that day. The day that you disrespect me in public is the day you get no treat that night or that day. Something. You're listing a consequence. So then when they do it, they go, well, I see you chose not to have a dessert today. And you can say it calmly. In fact, you can say it sort of, I'm sympathizing with you. I'm so sorry that you chose not to have dessert. Because you probably would have liked it, but hey, those are the rules. What can I say? So you can keep disrespecting me. And then you could say, you know, if you do it twice in a day, then you miss out on tomorrow's benefit. Or the next day, or the next day. Okay? It's up to you. I don't care what you do. I'm giving you a choice. And you make your own decision. Listening. Listening. How can you build bridges? By listening. Proverbs 16:16. How much better to get wisdom than gold, to choose understanding rather than silver. Understanding. The number one way to communicate with anyone is to listen. I know we want to talk, okay? We want to do our fair share of talking. But no one is going to listen to your talking unless you listen. If you're not a listener, then why should people listen to what you have to say? You know, there are a lot of talkers in this world that just talk over people. Yeah, well, we don't listen to talkers. Now, when someone, you know, listens to me. I feel better about myself. I feel better about you. And so I'm already more sympathetic to what you have to say. And that's true with our kids too. Listen to them. That's step one in forming a bridge to them. Instead of always correcting and directing, telling them what to do, and telling them what they did wrong, and telling them how they could improve what they did. Even when they did it right, they could improve. Of course they could. They're kids. See, that's the dilemma we parents are in. The reason why we are always constantly correcting and directing them is because they're kids and everything they do could be improved upon. And we point it out, okay? Instead of, hey, how did you feel that went? How do you feel, you had a problem and then you fixed the problem. How do you feel it went? I thought I did a pretty good job. I do too. Now, could it be improved? Yes, it could. But instead of telling them how it could be improved, why don't you ask them, how do you think you could improve that? Let them be in charge of fixing the problem rather than you always fixing the problem. See, that's communication. It isn't communication when it's all one-sided. Okay, downloading. Okay. Sharing. How do you build bridges? You can do it by sharing. Matthew 19, 13 through 14. Then little children were brought to Jesus for him to place his hands on them and pray for them. But the disciples rebuked those who brought them. Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me. Do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." For much of human history, children were sort of put on the side. Children were to be seen but not heard. It was more, for a lot of human history, it was a sort of an authoritative kind of down, mom and dad are in charge and you are the servants, okay? Now we realize that human beings are human beings. Let's share our lives with them. In Jesus' day, the children were probably, low on the totem pole of importance. And Jesus was a rabbi, he was a teacher. And all of a sudden these little children come flocking to him. And Jesus doesn't have time for little children. And Jesus says, no. These children are important. And Jesus begins to speak to them. That's how we should see our own children. Share our lives with them. Don't, we tend to think, that we live in sort of the adult world. And our kids, they live in this little kid world. Let's not make such a hard line between the adult world and the child world. Why not tell them things? My dad was a fireman. And he was a fireman for 30, 40 years. And I really have no idea what he did. He rarely talked about his job. He worked, it was a 24-hour shift, and he was home quite a bit, and he started other businesses when he was home. And I know a lot about those businesses, but I really don't know much about the fire department. I knew a few times where he almost died because he, got lost in a burning building with the smoke, and his oxygen tank ran out, and he didn't know the way out. That's like the only story I know. I really don't know much about. Why not? Because adults tend to think, there's the adult world and then there's the kid world. And we don't cross that line. Well, cross the line. Let kids know what's going on in your life. Share your life with them. And then let them share their life with you. All right. Number 4. How to build bridges. You can build bridges by negotiating. Each of you should look not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of others. Negotiating. A lot of times, A lot of times we tell our kids, we are the ones in charge. And we just tell them this is how it goes. Here's the rules, here's the consequences. We are large and in charge. Again, it's not letting your children be a part of the discussion. So then they can either obey or rebel. Those are their options. In every relationship, the best buy-in is when people agree to something. If a rule just comes down from on high, people generally look for a way around it. And guess what? Kids do too. Here's the rule, comes down from on high. They don't understand it. They didn't agree to it. But the parent is in charge. They're large and in charge. So I guess I got to do it. If I have to. And if they know about it. But if I can get away with something, then I will get away with something. That's true in almost every arena of life. But when you let people be in on the rule making, and if everyone agrees about something, they're more likely to follow through with it and do it just because they think it's the right thing to do. It's the smart thing to do. It's the good thing to do. It's the most beneficial thing to do. So why not open it up for a little negotiation? Now, I know we're afraid that, all of a sudden we're giving our parenting thing away, and our kids are going to be selfish and self-absorbed, and they're going to want everything, right? And they want it all for free. But I think if you get used to this, because if they don't negotiate well, it doesn't go well. That's the way it is in the adult world. If you make outrageous demands, then people realize you're not really negotiating. And so they stop negotiating with you. So negotiation is when all parties are happy with the outcome. And if all parties aren't happy with the outcome, then we're not done negotiating. So I think if you start doing that with your children, they will gradually learn that it's in their best interest to find the happy ground where you can all agree. And then if everyone agrees, see, everyone's more likely to follow through. And kids feel like they're a part of something. They feel like what they have to say and what they think actually matters and counts. Now you have real communication going on, not just one-sided communication. See, that's a lot of parents just have one-sided communication. It's just down on the child, down on the child, down on the child. And the child never communicates back. So a lot of parents, when kids turn teenagers, they're like, my kid never tells me anything. Well, guess what? He never did tell you anything. Because there was nothing to tell. You never gave some space for him to say what he thinks without judging, without coming down, without saying, that's stupid. What kind of thing is that? So again, let children be children. They're not always going to have the best suggestion in the world. But if you shut it down with a heavy hand, then they're going to stop talking to you, which is what happens, isn't it? So you want to keep communication going. And the best way to keep communication going is to respect what a person says, even if you disagree with it. Allow them to say things that you disagree with. Allow them to back up what they're saying, even though you disagree with their reasons. And applaud some of the reasons, even if you disagree with the reasons. Because you want them communicating. You want them telling you things. This is true with your kids. It's true with your spouse. It's true with your friends. It's true in every arena of life. I just see people shutting down communication by, someone says something and then they come with a hammer back. Well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. How can you think such a thing? Well, if you're asking that question, how can you think such a thing? It means you don't know why they're thinking this thing. Why don't you find out why they're thinking this thing? Instead of shutting them down, you should be opening up. That's very interesting. I don't understand that. Why did you say that? Because I don't get that. Could you explain that for me? I'm really curious about how, you're thinking something, or maybe there's something I'm not aware of. Please tell me. See, now I'm curious about why you think what you think, even though I may disagree with it. That keeps the communication going. All right. How to build bridges. You can build bridges by helping your child get connected to Christ. 1 Corinthians 3, verse 10 and 11. Each of you should be careful how he builds. For no one can lay a foundation other than the one already laid, which is Jesus Christ. You want to build a communication foundation? You want to build a foundation, a relationship foundation from which you can communicate with your children? Introduce your child to a relationship to Jesus. See, a relationship, a foundation of Jesus in your relationship means we can overcome any obstacle. If we're connected in Christ, and this is true about any relationship, if we're Christians, we should be able to connect. If we're Christians, we realize that we're sinners by nature and that God sent his son to die for us on the cross so we can be forgiven. And if that's true, why can't we share this forgiveness with those around us? So we should be able to overcome every communication obstacle in Christ. See, we have to keep coming back to Christ because there are plenty of Christians who fight and never talk to each other. Why? Because they're focused on the argument. They're focused on the unfairness. This is unfair. He said this. He did this. It's unfair. He doesn't understand that. He doesn't understand that. And you go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Well, I'm never talking to you. I'm never talking to you. Okay. We're focused on the disagreement. We're not focused on our relationship to Christ. Is Jesus your Savior? Yes, he is. Is Jesus my Savior? Yes, he is. Did Jesus forgive you? Yes, he did. Did Jesus forgive me? Okay. Let's start from there and then work on our problem. See, that's what you want for your child too, that foundation of Jesus. Proverbs, last verse. Proverbs 14:26. Reverence for God gives a man deep strength. His children will have a place of refuge and security. The reason why communication, why things break down in communication, relationship breaks down, people blame communication, is because we don't have the deep strength. We don't have the deep connection. Without a deep connection to someone, every disagreement has the possibility of breaking the relationship. Why are so many children estranged from their parents? Because of some issue, something that came up, some disagreement, some argument, something the parent did, something the kid did, something both of them did or didn't do. And now we can't fix it. And we've tried, okay? I tried to fix it up with Dad, but he won't listen. I tried to fix it up with my son, but he won't listen. Right? It's because we don't have this foundation, this go back here, this deep strength. So, number one, as a parent, you need to have a relationship to Jesus. It has to ground you. It has to be deep. Why? So you can be a place of refuge and security for your children. And if you are that place of refuge, you're the safe place. You're the secure place. You're the place where every child can come to. Your children can come to you when they're in trouble because you're a safe place. You're a refuge. You know, when we get in trouble, even when we cause our own troubles, we can come to God and we feel God is a loving God. It's a safe place. God is not going to cast us out, but a lot of children don't have that view of their parents. If they get in trouble, if they do something that they know their parents would disapprove, and now they're in trouble because of it, they hide it from the parents. Why? Because my parents are not a safe place. They are not the refuge. They're the authority. They're the ones. They're the judges. They're the condemners. They're the ones who start off by saying, "I don't believe in you, and I believe you're going to mess up, and I'm looking for that." Instead of, "You're my son. I believe you are called by God, and God has given you gifts and abilities, and he has plans for you. And even though the devil tries to thwart it, nothing can stop God's purpose in you." Help your child get connected to Christ. That's the number one thing that you can do to improve communication.